Welcome to Mike. This is your host, Micah Cannon, and today we are going to talk about Paul George and his ridiculously amazing and huge contract. Now, make sure to first like and subscribe. All that's going to be up here. You've been here since the beginning. You already know that. And without further ado, let's get right into the video. Now, one thing about Paul George's contract, this contract actually makes him the highest paid player in the NBA. The highest paid player right now is Stephen Curry, making $43 million a year. With this new contract, Paul George would be making an astounding $47 million a year. He almost became the first $50 million per year player in history. He almost became that. That hasn't happened yet, but he's the closest. He's the highest paid NBA player in the NBA right now. And that sounds insane considering we just saw Pandemic P from a first-person point of view on TV every single day, yet now this guy is the highest paid player in the NBA. Clippers organization, I would really request and like to know what you were thinking with this. Of course, your team is basically in a tough spot right now because after that little fiasco you guys pulled in the second round, losing to the Nuggets when you were up 3-1 with quite possibly the best team that's ever been assembled in your franchise history. You guys lose in the second round. Managed to lose in the second round, then lose your sixth man of the year, Montrezl Harrell, in the process to the team that shares the same arena with you. And then we pay Paul George, or you guys pay Paul George, the highest paid NBA contract in the NBA today, if not in NBA history. What... I just want to know, because Paul George, now if this was MVP 28 point per game Paul George, I'd understand, but this is 21 point per game Pandemic P Paul George. This isn't the Paul George we've seen in the recent years, and yes, he has recently said good things, like Paul George just posted on Instagram, that he's back with the former trainer when he was, the trainer he trained with when he was in MVP mode, 28 points per game with Russell Westbrook. He's back with that trainer, and while that's good, I don't think you should pull the plug that easily. And yes, earlier this summer, he did say that he wanted to retire as a Clipper, but he said pretty much the same two things with his previous two teams. And, what happened was he ended up leaving both of those teams. He ended up leaving the Indiana Pacers, and he ended up leaving the Oklahoma City Thunder after a really short stint, and after himself requesting a trade, and Russell Westbrook tried to get him back there. I don't know. It was a whole ridiculous situation. The whole point is, why are they paying him so much money? Paul George this year averaged 21 points a game. I believe he averaged around 21, 5, and 5, if that. They usually get paid around 35 to 30 million. And they're in that category. Anywhere between 25 to 35 million. That's where a 21 point per game Pandemic P should probably be. Because, he's still Paul George. Paul George is still one of the best players in the NBA today. Paul George is probably a top 10 player in the NBA when healthy and when not in the playoffs in 2020. However, I just don't believe that you should pull the plug and invest that much in a player to the point where he's the highest paid player in quite possibly NBA history going into next year. Next year's when the extension starts. This year he's still on his old OKC deal. However, you don't give somebody who just absolutely disappeared in the playoffs and had one of the worst statistical seasons of his career, not even making an all-star game, the highest paid NBA contract in history. I don't know what in the world is going on with the Clippers organization, but you have to consider what happened. They maybe want to keep him around for a long time, and maybe that $47 million contract was the incentive. Because you have to think, Lou Williams, he wants to leave. He wants no more part of that organization, and that's clear. There have been trade rumors surrounding him the entire summer. Same thing with Montrezl Harrell. Montrezl Harrell, sixth man of the year, he actually ended up going to the Lakers, the team that shares the same building with them. Yes, that is how bad he wanted to get away from that team. He took a pay cut. Not only that, but he went to the team he's been rivaling for years to come. That's how much people really want to leave this team. And then Patrick Beverley doesn't like it. Many players said they didn't like the sort of special treatment that Kawhi Leonard and Paul George were getting. They wanted them to get treated the same way because the year before last year, the Lakers were an 8th seed, but not the Lakers. The Clippers, were an 8th seed, and they were one of the best teams in the NBA. They forced the Golden State Warriors, the Golden State-led the Kevin Durant led Golden State Warriors with Stephen Curry, that super team basically. They took them to 6 games, and while that doesn't sound too impressive, if you look at the way the team was built and you look at the way that they dominated the playoffs the year before and even that year, you'd realize that the Clippers were not a gritty team to play with. That's why they when they got the 2 superstars, so much hype was around them. Everyone was like, championship. They're already a 40-win team without them. They're going to get even better with them. But it turns out people like Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, 2 guys that aren't really locker room leaders, especially in Paul George's case. Dude, seriously, like, this is a real story, by the way. You might not believe your ears, but during the pandemic, when, of course, they were in the bubble, Paul George gave a post-game speech, and you'll never guess what the locker room did. The locker room responded with an infamous laugh. They laughed and rolled their eyes at Paul George while he was giving his post-game speech on why they should be champions. And we just paid that guy how much money? It's just insane. And no shade to Paul George. He's still one of the best players in the league. But at the same time, you can't really pay a player that much for, at first, obviously destroying, or at least being a part of destroying the chemistry on your team, on top of not being a locker room leader at all. His own teammates are rolling his eyes and laughing at him as he's giving his post-game speech. One of the leaders in the locker room, one of the veterans, one of the best players, that guy, the guy that may be, or is supposed to be the best leader of your team, he's not a leader at all. And we all know Kawhi Leonard does not say a word. He's not a leader, but this video is not about him. That's for a later time. Paul George, not a leader in the locker room, didn't make an All-Star game this season, had the worst statistical season in his career, and now we're going to pay him $47 million per year. It just doesn't make any sense. A Clippers organization, you guys really have some stuff to think about, because with that big money, how are you going to pay another star to possibly come over there? How are you going to pay Kawhi Leonard? How are you going to pay all the players on the bench? How are you going to pay one of the best bench players in the league, Lou Williams, who has requested a trade, by the way? How are they going to do that? It simply didn't make sense to me. You guys can let me know what you think about it in the comments. Anyways, that is the end of this very short video. Make sure to like and subscribe. All that is going to be up here. I love you guys, and until next time, I will catch you next episode.